Welcome to the Cambridge Financial Podcast with Bert Salazar, CEO at Cambridge Financial Partners, LLC. This podcast is all about tax-preferred retirement planning, economics, financial risk management, and achieving a risk-free and successful financial life. Now, your host, Bert Salazar.
Hey, good day, everyone. Welcome to another Cambridge podcast, as every single week. I'm excited to be here with you because I love to share information, and most important, we love to share information with all of you because at the end of the day, information without education always leads to failure. Now, due to the specialty that we have in working with retirees and people that are in pre-retirement, it is very critical for us to always bring issues and concerns that many of our clients are facing on a daily basis as they prepare for retirement. Now, this not only applies to our clients, but it also applies for the vast majority of Americans that are 5 to 10 years away from retirement. The challenge that we are seeing in the marketplace, especially as we visit with potential new clients on a weekly basis, is the vast majority of them are not prepared for retirement because they have failed to do due diligence when it comes to retirement planning preparation. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, many Americans, as they get closer to retirement, they start looking at their investments, their 401ks or IRAs or mutual funds, whatever investments, perhaps some real estate for some. But they look at it, they want to maybe become a little bit more conservative, and that's as far as it goes. They don't take into consideration the type of assets that they have, how those assets are going to be taxed at retirement. They don't take into consideration their tax bracket. And they really haven't considered survivor benefits for the surviving spouse, as many of my clients are coming to understand right now. And most important, they don't understand volatility, because they think that the market is always going to go up and up and up, especially since we have had a bull market for the last 8 years. But we're actually at an 8-year long of a 5-year full bull market. So there's no doubt in my mind and the majority of experts in the marketplace that we are going to have a stock market correction in the very near future. Now, to what extent will that be? Well, no one knows, but obviously is going to be one. And for all of us, especially those of us that are either in retirement or approaching retirement, it is very critically important that we protect ourselves from market volatility. Now, when it comes to the type of work that we do at Cambridge, and there are a couple of things that we do when it comes to retirement planning. Number one, we want to make certain that clients have a well set up portfolio of 7702 plans. A 7702 plan is a product that is managed, that is overseen by the IRS code, which includes life insurance. And life insurance is a very flexible vehicle that can be used for retirement planning in many different ways. For instance, you can purchase a contract that would be for asset protection only. And this contract will give you the ability to start to invade principal and interest on the vast majority of your assets without having to worry about running out of money, because at time of death, your survivor is going to be fully protected because, whatever amount of assets you have used throughout your lifetime. And although you may have invaded principal, and $1 million or a $2 million portfolio may now be $300,000-$400,000 because you lived a long and comfortable life, then the life insurance would come in and replace that asset upon your death. So that becomes asset insurance. Another way to use life insurance is as a way to create a volatility hedging or a volatility buffer concept, as I'm going to be talking to you about today. And the volatility buffer concept is one that I think you will find very interesting. Now, most Americans, sadly enough, do not know enough about insurance planning to make the right decision at the right time and for the right reasons. And many a times they feel that they'll buy term insurance, and then at age 65 when they retire, then the policy will go away and will be canceled, and then they're going to be home free. They don't understand that life insurance can play a number of major roles that most other assets would not be able to do, because of the flexibility and because of the IRS code tax benefits that life insurance contracts have. So I'm going to share this volatility buffer concept, and I think just so all of you get to understand this, the volatility buffer concept is one of the most creative retirement distribution techniques available in the retirement planning arena. Now, when properly addressed and executed, it provides a conduit and safeguard against asset volatility due to market and or interest rate volatility. And I also like to include interest rate volatility because, I have clients that retired in the 1990s, and they were able to place all their money in a CD and get a 6% interest rate. Well, when was the last time that any of us on this podcast ever saw a 6% CD? So therefore, these same clients that were generating on $1 million portfolio, that were generating $60,000 a year 20 years ago, today are barely generating $20,000. So they have to take either more risk, take their money out of their CD and invest it for growth, or start to dip into principal in order to offset the difference in the interest rates not being paid. So the volatility buffer concept is a distribution straddle technique, for clients wishing to preserve and enhance their retirement income while protecting existing assets from stock market erosion and sequencing of returns. Everyone thinks that the market moves on a linear basis, and you'll see that on traditional illustrations and calculations, but we all know that the market goes up and down every day. So the sequencing of returns becomes a critical aspect of retirement distribution once you hit your mid-60s and are in full retirement. Now, most financial planners and advisors fail to educate their clients on the impact of market volatility and sequencing of returns when dealing with longevity planning. Now, the rules of engagement, as I've said many a times, totally change when clients shift, from accumulation of assets to distribution of assets. During your accumulation years, it's all about the accumulation rate. But during retirement years, it is about the distribution rate, and issues like taxation, inflation, asset volatility, and timing of market and interest rate losses can create havoc in traditional investment portfolios and retirement accounts. Now, for this reason, we at Cambridge consider volatility buffer and distribution straddle techniques a critical part of retirement planning process. No one can forecast a financial outcome, so being prepared is key to financial independence, for clients that may spend 20 to 30 years in retirement, which is something that, we had not heard of in the past. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of examples depicting sequencing of returns on identical accounts. And I think you're going to notice that I'm going to give you two options, option one and option two. They have the same amount of assets, the same amount of income distribution, the same amount of market returns, and the same 15-year period. Yet the outcome is completely different between the two options. And you wonder, well, how can that be? In option two, the second option that I'm going to be sharing with you, life insurance is not used for death benefit purposes, but it is used as asset insurance in order to protect against market volatility and distribution from retirement accounts during negative years. See, one of the major problems that we have is that if the market drops 10, 15, 20%, and you're accumulating in your 401k or your retirement accounts, as long as you don't need that money in order to make ends meet, well, it's okay. You can wait a few years until the market recovers, and then, no losses will be on your portfolio. But what if you're already in retirement and you have to take money out of those assets in order to maintain your standard of living? And now the market drops on any given year 10, 15, 20, 25, 30%. And on top of that, you have to compound that problem by taking a standard of living distribution in order to make ends meet. You just compounded a problem that you didn't have, prior to retirement. So it's something that is very critical to understand, appreciate, and make sure that you execute and you plan for it accordingly. Now, the value of the example and the exercise that I'm going to walk you through at retirement is $2 million for this exercise. Now, don't be alarmed, because the following concept will apply in every situation, regardless of the asset amount or account value. So it could be, $500,000, $1 million, $1.5 million. It could be $2 million, whatever that number may be. Here, the critical aspect is the technique that is implemented, and the quicker the volatility buffer accelerator growth can position the client in an enviable retirement situation, the better off you're all going to be. Now remember, retirement is about the distribution of assets and the ability to create distribution alternatives depending on interest rates and or market performance and stock market situational guidelines. Now, in this exercise, the clients are 65 years of age, the client on option 1 and the client on option 2. They're obviously married, and they both have $2 million of assets at retirement. They're both taking $150,000 a year for retirement income. Now, since these assets are qualified plan assets, obviously they're going to take a distribution of $150,000, but then they're going to have to pay federal income taxes at whatever rate. In this case, the rate is about 33%, so they're in a fairly high marginal and effective tax rate. So therefore, they're going to pay, quite a bit of money in taxes. Out of $150,000, they're going to be netting about $100,000. Now, in option 1, after 15 years of taking $150,000 of annual distribution, the $2 million asset at the end of 15 years, in other words, when the client is 80 years of age, is now $941,000. And I'm just rounding that number off. And the reason for that is the client obviously did not have a buffer distribution strategy, did not have a straddle. So although the market in that 15-year period went down 4 times, then obviously one time it went down almost 15%. Another time it went down 26%. Another time it went down 7%. And the fourth time it went down 5%. The client had no other option but to take distribution out of that particular market and in that particular account. Now, in option 2, the client again started with the same $2 million, was taking $150,000 out of their investment accounts every year. Yet, at the age of 80, instead of having $941,000 in their IRA account, they have $3.8 million in their IRA. Now, you will notice that the ending account values between option 1 and option 2 are enormously different. Now, although the rates of returns and distribution amounts are the same, option 1 has an ending account value, as I stated, of just north of $941,000, where option 2 has a account value ending at age 80 of $3.8 million. Now, how can that be possible? How can option 2 have 4 times the account value that option 1 has within the same time frame? Well, the answer is simple, yet it requires proper distribution planning. Now, during negative years, those 4 years that we've talked about, this client is taking distribution out of his life insurance policy, since asset growth inside a whole life insurance policy is guaranteed. So in other words, in those years that the client suffer a loss in the market, instead of compounding that problem by continuing to take money out of that particular asset, the client just shifted the distribution to his whole life policy, which suffered no distribution volatility or sequencing of returns, because whole life policies are totally guaranteed. So by doing that, the client is allowing his or her IRA account to recover from previous year losses without having to compound the distribution problem. Now, once the IRA asset recovers during positive years, then client starts taking distribution of that set account all over again. Now, obviously, remember that $150,000 IRA distribution in a 33% federal income tax bracket produces $100,000 of net income proceeds. A $100,000 distribution from a whole life insurance policy is the equivalent of $150,000 from an IRA, since no taxes are assessed due cost basis and or loans. Now remember, there are only 3 vehicles, as I have stated many a times, under the IRS code where you can take the distribution tax-free. And those are your Roth IRAs, your Roth 401ks, and your 7702 plans, which are the plans that I'm just talking about here, which include whole life insurance per se. Now, at the end of the day, retirement distribution and longevity living is predicated upon having the right assets, producing the right amounts of income, distributing that income at the right time, protecting against the risk of living too long, protecting against the risk of living with a disability, and creating the proper volatility straddle buffer in order to mitigate dire consequences while safeguarding loved ones with incremental survivor benefits. And what I mean by that statement, which I know it's a little bit interesting to understand, is that when you're using proper insurance planning, not only can you set up a 7702 plan that is going to be geared primarily to the offsetting of sequencing of returns and market volatility, but you can also create a separate 7702 plan in order to accelerate the distribution rate of your assets in order to maintain your standard of living in retirement. Inflation and taxation are the major killer of retirees and their assets. And one of the major things and one of the major problems that you want to avoid in retirement is you want to make sure that you don't run out of money before you run out of life. Now, the challenge for that is if you don't have a 7702 plan that is going to protect your assets at retirement, then you're going to be forced to just live off interest only. And not only are you going to be able to only take the interest, so you're never going to be able to enjoy the principal of your investments, because obviously if you start to invade principal, now you may be depleting those assets on behalf of your surviving spouse. And then when that client passes away, then no one knows what's going to be left for that survivor. And that survivor may now be in dire straits because of their inability to be able to maintain their standard of living after the first spouse passed away, from a business perspective. So in order to accomplish that, you need a life insurance contract that would be a death benefit contract. That means that if you have $1 million of assets, then you want to protect it with $1 million of death benefit. And the reason why you want to do that is because now, by doing so, you have earned the ability to start taking principal and interest out of that same account in order to maintain the standard of living even through inflationary increases, and thus provide your family with a much better life in retirement. And then upon your passing, then that death benefit proceed would be paid federal income tax free to that surviving spouse, and now he or she can go ahead and continue to distribute the assets that were available at the time of death, and or take a portion of that tax-free death benefit that was paid in the amount of $1 million, and now your surviving spouse can create their own guaranteed pension distribution planning without having to have any hesitation as to taking principal and interest at the same time. Now, that is not the same as the volatility buffer, because in the volatility buffer scenario, the other life insurance policy that you would purchase, so the 7702 plan that you would purchase, in that particular contract, you want to put as much money as possible, because you want to create a volatility buffer that would generate anywhere between 3 and 6 years of volatility buffer, meaning that if the market drops 5 or 6 times throughout your lifetime, that you can allow those assets to recover while using the existing assets inside that particular 7702 plan in order to maintain your standard of living without compounding that problem by taking distribution out of an asset that is losing money or has lost money on any given year. See, always remember that the golf clubs, are seldom going to win a tournament, if ever. It is always a swing and the management of the golf course that will guarantee success for anyone that plays golf. Well, the same applies to the retirement game, and you got to play the retirement game to win. And as a retirement strategist and as an economic advisor, my job is to assist my clients in getting them, to kind of change the way that they see things. Because, when people change the way they see things, the things that they see change. So again, I just wanted to take a few minutes today, kind of share with you 2 ways that you can use 7702 plans in order to not only maximize the amount of distribution from your retirement accounts, which is something that is extremely important for retirees today and in the future, but also how to use a 7702 plan in order to enhance the distribution rate during negative years without having a negative impact on those assets that have just suffered losses because of the sequencing of returns or market volatility. Again, looking forward to seeing you next week. I want to wish you all the very, very best, and thank you for your time today. Bye.